Greetings. Welcome back to Sick Flick, a stream of consciousness podcast discussing everything under the sun regarding film and television. I'm your host, August. I'm so glad to be back. So glad to have you back here with me. So glad to get things started again. Today we're going to be ranking A24 films. Something light, something fun, maybe controversial. I don't know. So yeah, we're just going to be discussing A24 films, the one that I've seen, and how I would rank them. But first, our entertainment news. I don't want to call it e-news, but like they did kind of slap when they did e-news. You know what I'm saying? Like it works. It works. But what's going on in the industry, news, facts and tidbits. We have yet to come up with a name. But anyways, for that segment, in lieu, if that is the correct saying, with A24 is I want to discuss the Travis Scott, Cactus Jack, A24 collaboration news going on. So, if you don't know, there were Instagram posts that revealed that Travis Scott and his conglomerate, I don't know what you would call it, Cactus Jack, his brand, they signed a production deal with A24 Films. So they're set to produce multiple films for A24, and that the post that revealed it was a picture of a script. It had like a blackout title, but I think people have inferred that the title is like Utopia or something like that. So yeah, Cactus Jack. If you don't know, I don't know. I don't fully understand it, but whatever. Cactus Jack is apparently like a multi-product brand conglomerate media thing. Of Travis Scott. They've had other collaborations or like associated franchises with like McDonald's that recently just came out, Fortnite, fashion brands, stuff like that. So yeah, and then lastly, the first project, since I said it's multiple projects, the first project is supposed to launch around the time of his upcoming album. I think neither of those have been revealed yet. Um, but it's supposed to align with his upcoming album, and the rest will follow. So yeah, just a little short tidbit on things going on. So that can be another work to add to the A24 repertoire in the future. But that will be interesting to see. I would like to know more about what it is. Like if they're doing multiple films, like what kind of films? Are they films, feature films, or are they short films? Music videos? I don't know. But I'm excited to see what they're going to be about. Um, and I wish I knew when to expect it as well, but I guess just in general know that it's coming soon. So yeah, that's all I have for that segment. Very short. We're going to get right into the episode. I have 6 categories or rankings, I guess. And like I said, it's not all the A24 films, believe it or not. I have not seen all of the A24 films. I've seen a good bit, but not all of them. But these are going to be of the ones that I've seen and kind of remember seeing, you know? To go through the categories before we dive in, just to get an understanding of where my mindset's at. The first one is called a literal classic, dead ass. Like, dead ass, like it's a literal classic. No jokes aside, I'm being serious 110%. I think we already know what movie is falling into that category, but that is the first one. That is the first one. That is our A plus 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 plus. The second one is iconic truly. it is the movies that are truly iconic, you know? Like, I'm not gonna say they're a literal classic, you know? I'm gonna be realistic. I'm not gonna be hyperbolic. The other one, I'm not being hyperbolic. I stand by that statement. I stand beside them. But the other ones, I'm not gonna be hyperbolic and say that they're a literal classic, but I will say that they are iconic, truly. So that is it. That is point blank. Period. The third one, it's a pretty good ride. It's a pretty good ride. You know, like I had fun. It was enjoyable. You know, these are movies that I whether I come back to them is up in the air. I mean, I'll come back to them again at some point because they're great movies. But it's like, you know what? Like I really enjoyed myself. That was a good movie. I had fun. You know? I think that explains it very well. The fourth one is it's not bad. It's not bad. It's not a bad movie. I might not have been the biggest fan of it. There might have been some issues I had with it. It might not have been the smoothest ride. You know, like there were some issues. There are some issues I have with it. But it wasn't bad. It wasn't a bad movie, you know? The fifth one is eh. It was It was either okay or I didn't really care for it. These are films that not necessarily again are technically bad films. Because I feel like for the most part, not to be that guy, but A24 films aren't really that bad in my opinion. I don't consider them to be bad films, but they're just films that I don't have to see again. If I tell people about it, I'm like, you know what? Like, it wasn't for me. You might like it. I know a lot of people like these films, but it's like, it wasn't my cup of tea, you know? And then the last one is a scammer and a fraud. A scammer and a fraud. Listen, like I said, I don't consider, like, there are rarely any A24 films where I'm like, that's a bad film, you know? Like, I wouldn't consider any of these to actually be bad films. Actually, we'll talk about it. But I call them a scammer and a fraud because, for the most part, I think they revealed themselves to be not a different film, but they diverge from my expectations a lot more than some of the other films. These are films where it's like, oh, I thought this was gonna be that, and it's not that, or you know, like I thought this was gonna be like this and then it turned out to be like this, or i just I just was not expecting the end result that I got. I'll say that again, a scam and a fraud. You know, I was not expecting the end result that I got, and the end result was not one that I particularly cared for. So to go over, you know, my justifications, those are my six categories. um that is about it. So we'll hop into the first one, a literal classic, dead ass. And that is Moonlight. Moonlight is the only movie in that category. Yes, I did make an entire category for Moonlight specifically because that is the truth. That is the truth, actually. So I don't know what else to, you know, like I try to limit, listen, I try to limit the amount of times that I actually no, I don't. I don't try to limit the amount of times that I talk about Moonlight. I try to limit the extent that I talk about Moonlight in every episode. Because as I hint in every episode, there will be a Moonlight specific episode. So I try not to give all of my eggs out? What is this saying? I try, I try not, I try not to put all of my eggs in one. Does that even make sense though? I try not to put all my eggs in one basket for Moonlight. It doesn't, but whatever. But anyways, I try not to give my all for Moonlight in every episode. I don't know, but know that because of that, I will go hard on an episode of the future. Who knows when that will be, but it will be. So I'm not going to talk about Moonlight too much. I don't know what else there is to say anyways. It is a classic. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like it is a classic. It is what it is. It's a classic. Moonlight is a classic. Like, literally. You know what I'm saying? Like the category, like the category is all that you need. You know. I know. We all know. So I really like there's really nothing for me to say with Moonlight. And maybe that's a good thing for all of us right now. So yeah. So moving on to the next category. Our iconic truly category. The first one, and this is in no particular order within the categories. This is off the dome. The first one is Hereditary. I love Hereditary. Hereditary is such a great movie, and I don't know. I'm realizing I have no explanation for a lot of the great ones at least. Hereditary is a fantastic movie. Its plot line is immaculate. I know a lot of people weren't a fan of how it ended. They didn't like the path it went. For some people, Hereditary is a scammer and a fraud. And it's like I understand that. And especially in the beginning of me like watching the movie and like when it first came out, I was like, you know what? And like, I was disappointed too. Like I thought it was gonna be this movie and it ended up being this movie. But the more that I watch it, the more that I'm like, you know what? It is fantastic that it was that movie because it like I don't know. Like I think and this is me talking out of the ass because I don't watch horror films. I don't watch horror films like that. Um, I've increased it in the past, but I'm so pretentious about the horror films that I watch. I'm very much like it has to be like a art house film that has like horrific elements to it or whatever the fuck. So like I'm that kind of person. I don't like to watch horror films alone off of pure horror themselves. Horror films actually do not work for me. Like they don't scare me. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is about life that has hardened me, but jump scares they don't get an extra blink from me. They truly do nothing for me at this point. So it's like I need films, especially horror films. I need films that don't rely on a lot of the traditional conventions of like a horror film. I don't know if I've said this before, but that is just like me personally. So I usually need more out of a horror film because I also don't like gore that makes my stomach like it messes up. It messes up my gut health. It messes up my gut health, which messes up my mental health. And we know that our gut health is the most important. So it's like I try to stay away from horror because, it's just not healthy for me. But so yeah, like with a horror film, I need more than the traditional conventions of like a horror film. But I also like, which includes like I can't do gore, so it's like I need more substance. I don't like the way that I'm talking about it because I don't want it to feel like horror film is just like mindless, brainless, just low tier entertainment. No, I really respect horror film as a genre. I'm just saying for me, especially with me being a drama person, me being somebody that is like really heavily into dramatic films, drama at the theater. I don't know. But anyways, I need some sort of element to my horror films in that way. And what I love about Hereditary is that it does that. Like I think I saw somewhere where it's like Hereditary is like a family drama gone wrong or something like that. Like a family drama gone wrong. I think that's what it was. Where like the core of the film is rooted in drama. It's rooted in I would say like realism in a sense, which I feel like is an important part of drama in general, is the realistic aspect. And so it's like it only like it its foundation is in realism, is in drama, and then only towards the end do you start to pick up on those supernatural, paranormal, horror aspects. Um, and that's how it turns in the end. And maybe that's why people didn't really care for it, because it's like, yes, the film is very suspenseful and it's very um thriller-ish throughout the film. I think it's really in those last few minutes of the film, like the last 10, maybe 15 minutes of the film, where it actually turns into um like a supernatural paranormal horror film when it involves like demons, ghosts, and blah blah blah. So I can see how in that sense a lot of people didn't like it, because that's where it does that shift. But I think for me, the fact that it is a drama at the heart of it is what helps me enjoy it as a horror film as well, because it gives me something that I can latch onto for the majority of the movie. Does that make sense? Um, so yeah, that's why I like it. I think again, I think that I don't know, like I think the way that it is unflinching in the way that it showcases and discusses a traumatic moments, drama, horror, everything is great. Like I do like those films that are very like edgy and are very like they lean into the grittiness, the gross, horrific, traumatic parts of life. Because I feel like a lot of times drama is very much about, it's much about subtlety, it's much about beauty. Sad moments are very overlaid, very inferred. Um, and a lot of trauma in dramatic films is more so assumed. And with this film, it's not, you know? And I think that that's also why people like Ari Aster as well, is that he's one of those directors that doesn't flinch at the sight of gore, um, while still like not in the same way that like horror films do. Does that make sense? Like I don't know. I see Ari Aster in the same vein as like Harmony Korine, in the fact that their subject matter is very gritty, in the fact that they're and I guess like Khalik Allah too, because his films are very like they catch, I don't know how to describe it. They capture a part of like realism in like the human experience and like in humanity that is very uncomfortable, because most people, especially like privileged people, are not used to seeing it. And so it's like in everyday life, if they see it, they're like, oh my gosh, like that's so gross. Like I can't look at it. But when you're sitting in front of a film and you're kind of being forced to watch it and they put that on screen, then it's like that relationship between seeing something that you otherwise are not used to seeing something that is unflattering to watch, but you're literally being forced to watch it, you know? Like that's how I see all three of those directors in, and that's why I feel like they have their own particular audience. They have their own particular like cult following, because they're the kind of directors that, you know, those people that they want to see that true grittiness, that true um unflinching look at realism go for. So I say all that to say that I love Hereditary. Hereditary and Mother are like my two go-to horror films. Those are the films that I annoy everybody with because I want to watch them at any points of the day. Um, I love just sitting and having fun with people and being like, y'all want to watch Hereditary? Like, you want to watch Mother? And then everybody being like, no, like, what the fuck? Like, no. So those are my two like horror comfort films. So that's all I can say about Hereditary. I just think it's truly a classic. Well, it's not a classic. I mean, if I have to, yeah, to stick in line with my ratings, it's iconic, truly. So the next one, Lady Bird. Duh, I love Lady Bird. Lady Bird. Lady Bird is just one of those characters that I see her and I feel seen and I feel like we get each other. And I feel like if she was a real person, we would be friends. Even though, like, I'd be like, okay, girl, you lack some sort of self awareness. Um, but I guess that is just the teenage experience. I mean, that's the human experience, but more so the teenage experience. But I love Ladybird, and here's also why. And this is to the people on fucking Twitter that want to create think pieces about everything and they want to create discourse about everything and it's just not necessary. I I saw a tweet that's like I will not be engaging in the discourse about Lady Bird being a bad film because that is just not true. That is I stand by that statement. Lady Bird is not a bad film. Lady Bird is a great film. And it's like if you get like obviously Lady Bird is not the most likable character, but also is what character is going to be truly likable? If you're making a real film, if you're making a film that is supposed to capture realism, like why would you create a perfect character? That makes literally no sense. But anyways, it's also a great film because it captures the relationship between like a mother and her daughter. And that's really why I think it's such a gem because I don't think we've gotten a lot of films that look at that relationship. There's not a lot of films that truly discuss like parent to child relationships in a way that is not focused on like absentee parents, you know? And that's not me saying anything about those films. I think that those films are important in their own right. They have an important story to tell. Fucking Moonlight. Like you know, like I'm not dissing those films at all. But again, there's usually a predominant narrative when it comes to certain sides of stories being told, you know? And in that way when discussing like children and their parents and the relationship between the two, it's usually not one where it's like let's show a pretty functional family, a pretty I won't say healthy, but somewhat positive family structure, you know, not even in like the fact that the parents are together and they're both in the house, but also kind of yes. Um, but also just show like how these seemingly good family structures can still be tumultuous, but also specifically looking at the relationship between the parent and the child, specifically a mother and a daughter, because I feel like that's an interesting relationship that you don't see a lot on screen. I just think at the end of the day, that relationship is it was interesting to highlight and it made me think about my own relationship with my mother or relationships that you see most times with daughters and their mothers, especially you know when you're still close to your mother but it's like this lady get on my nerve but in the same second like we moving on, our relationship is moving on. So like I really enjoyed that and I think again it at the end of the day like it truly does capture that relationship well. Because I was thinking about it the other day. I forget what it was. I don't know. I was doing something and it enlightened me to think about like what the nun think she was a nun, the nun, like, teacher, advisor lady was saying when she was talking about Lady Bird's essay or letter to Sacramento. She's like, you speak with such love and affection for for Sacramento, for the city. And she's like, I don't know, like maybe I just, pay attention or whatever. And she's like, well, like, isn't that kind of the same thing, like love and attention? And like it made like that moment makes you realize kind of the underlying essence of the film, which is like this relation, like though it may seem like your mother is always on you, your mother does not actually like you, like your mother doesn't actually care about you. It's like she actually loves and cares for you so deeply because she has dedicated her entire life in a sense, or she's dedicated so much of her life in taking care of you and looking after you. And it's like those small details where you're like, okay, like it's annoying that she did this and she could have gone about it in a more positive way, yes, but it's also like, but I understand that she's doing this um because like deep down she actually cares about me, she actually loves me. It might not be translating the way that she thinks it is, but I know that. And I think, like, again, Lady Bird knows that too. Like anytime people come for her mother, she's right there to defend them, even though like 2 seconds later she might be like, oh, my mother's so annoying. So yeah. Again, like I have no justification as to why any of these films are in their categories, at least right now. Like these are just films that I love. These are just films that I think are actually iconic. But also I think that they do something interesting. Like I think Hereditary did something interesting for um drama and horror films. I think Lady Bird does something interesting for showcasing uh a different type of relationship that you don't usually see, and kind of really drawing attention to the dynamics of that relationship and what it ultimately means. Um, and then the third one is at the top of this list for sure. The only reason why I don't consider this to be a literal classic is because I truly understand that, like, theoretically, it might not be adding much to the conversation of cinema. Because again, I hee hee ha ha about Moonlight being a classic, but it's like the dead ass part, like I'm so serious. Like I could literally, I could and should and probably will write a book on how it is like it is actually an important part of film history. It is important in a lot of film theories. Like it is a theoretically dense film, on top of the fact that it has amazing acting, directing, cinematography, sound, blank, all of it, like amazing accomplishments. I think also it is theoretically dense, which I think is a part of what makes a classic a classic. And I'll say this, not that I don't think 20th Century Women isn't theoretically dense, or I don't think any of these could be enlightening to some degree. For 20th Century Women specifically, I'll say I've not found it to be in the same caliber as Moonlight. But do not be mistaken on my love for 20th Century Women, because I truly love that film. I truly love that film. That is another film that I look at and I admire and use as an inspiration for my life. Yeah, so 20th Century Women, it is iconic, truly. I think, like, I love the idea, I love the family structure. I've always been somebody that really enjoyed the idea of, um, like, like a built family, I guess, or like more so in like the saying, like, it takes a village to raise a child or whatever. But in the sense also where like you could see it in a lot of queer family structures where it's like these are people I chose to be my family. You know, like I not that I see them in the same, but I feel like the foundation of both of those is kind of the same, where it's like relying on your community in order to build each other up, in order to keep the community thriving. But also when it comes to, like in this case, raising a child, um like just not like using your resources, using your community, using your found family, your family in general, to help you take care of and raise a child. So like in 20th century women, it's primarily a mother and her son, um, a single mother and her son, but the people that also live in her house, her roommates or whatever, they also take a hand in like help raising him or just help him become a well-rounded human being. And I really like the idea of that. Like I really enjoyed that concept of just like yes, yes, your family's your family, but your family extends beyond your immediate family because I have other people in my life that I care for, that care for you, and that are going to make sure that you are raised well. But also in realizing, at least in her I guess in general, and realizing that as the parent, you can't be the sole raiser, or you just aren't going to be the sole raiser of a child, if that makes sense. In the same where it's like now, but it's less of a conscious effort. Um, your friends are raising you. My friends are raising me. My friends are teaching me very important things about life. My outside community, the people I work with, the people I go to school with, you know, those people are shaping me to become the person I am, both good and bad, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. And so, like in a sense, like these people are helping me grow up as well. It's just in this movie, Dorothea is actively making that. She's actively recognizing it, and she's actively making that decision too, you know? So, yeah, I just love 20th Century Women. I also love the aesthetics of the film. I think that it is such a beautifully crafted film. The era that it is capturing, I also love. I realized the other day, this is so random, but I realized the other day that in the movie, one of my favorite lamps, one of the lamps that I want to purchase, I think it's the Panthella, the Panthella, um, I think it's Werner Patton's Panthella lamp. It is the table lamp, not the floor lamp. I do want both, particularly the floor lamp. This is me going on a furniture design rant. This has nothing to do with anything, literally at all. But I do want the floor lamp, most importantly, but also the table lamp. It is in Dorothea's room. And I was looking at stills the other day of it, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, I didn't even realize it. But yes, the entire look and feel of that film I absolutely love, as well as again the aspect of relationships. I think that it's just really good. Um, The Killing of a Sacred Deer. I'm actually not the biggest fan of Yorgos Lanthimos, but I love The Killing of a Sacred Deer. More so, like I just love how fucked up it is, because I think it's really one of those movies where like by the end of the film you're like, what the fuck? Like this movie is actually deranged. This movie's actually deranged. Like it's one of those movies where it's like, what did I just watch? That's actually crazy. I can't believe it. And the imagery, oh my god. The imagery, and anyways, if you enjoy like horror, like I think you'll understand where I'm coming from, where it's like, yes, this imagery is sad and terrible, but something about it is just like it just does something to you, you know what I'm saying? But the imagery of the blood coming from the eyes. That's all I'll say. If you have not seen it, it's a really good movie. But the imagery of the blood coming from like the tear ducts of the eyes, fantastic, fantastic, fantastic. It is iconic truly because of that moment. Period. Favorite part of the film. Um, that's all I have to say. Killing of a Sacred Deer. It is amazing. It is another one of those like suspenseful thriller. I wouldn't call it a horror film. Suspenseful thriller films. But also again like Yorgos Lanthimos, like the off kilter, just monotone. Um, it's not language. Monotone tone of like their characters and the way that they speak. It adds a particularly like eeriness to the film. I think it enhances like, you know, aspects of all of his films. Like I think in The Lobster it helps to the comedic aspect. Um and I guess in what is that movie called? The one with Emma Stone in it. I forget what it's called. But in that one, I think again it also adds to the comedic elements, but also just like it just gives it an awkward tension. But I think in this film, and why I like this film more so than the other ones. I think that's where that monotoneness just like it truly works the best. It like it just truly makes every moment a bit more eerie and just more like what the fuck is going on, because everybody is just acting like their tone is cavalier. And so it just that juxtaposition, I think it works really well. So yeah, Killing of a Sacred Deer, great, great, great. Ex Machina. I really like Ex Machina, and I would consider it iconic truly. It doesn't have as much of an emotional hold on me than these other films. Really these last three, kind of not so the next one. But anyways, like they don't have as much of an emotional hold on me. Like I don't come to these films as much as I come to the films that I just talked about. Um, but I think again it did something different with the form. And I feel like with Ex Machina, it really like yes, we have robot films, and yes, that whole idea of like what if robots like they gain the consciousness to become their own person is like a thing that we've already discussed. You know, like it's not new, but I think this film really puts it into like it really puts it into like a physical manifestation, I guess, or like I think it. How do I describe it? Like I don't know. I think with like the difference between this and like iRobot is like iRobot like it just made it feel like it just like iRobot, I think there was still a disconnection between the fact that it's like this is a robot, because especially they look like robots. Not that that's the only factor, but it's like they look like robots and kind of were still like you know, like like I want to become like a human, like I want to blah 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 and whatnot. But I feel like with Ex Machina it really embodied like the like this is a robot, yes, but like this is as human as a robot could be. Like like this is a human. And so it kind of put like it kind of worked on that fear of like robots becoming human, but literally like it pushed it like the furthest it's ever gone. That whole fear, that whole like not even fear, but that whole like what if, the whole what if scenario, I feel like Ex Machina pushed it the farthest that it's gone, in which it's like this robot, not even this robot feels, looks, acts exactly like a human. They have desires, they have likes, they have interests, like they can tap into these things, like you know, like in every way that we would define the human experience, this is a human. We we just know they're not a human because we know that they are a robot. Does that make sense? Um, so yeah, like I feel like it did something different because it pushed that limit to the furthest that it's ever gone in our like collective imagination. And like in a sense, like you see the fears of like robotics. um the fears that people have of like robotics like pushed to the farthest degree. And I just feel like that new boundary breaking limitation or whatever is iconic. And it's a great film. And Oscar Isaac is in that film. I love Oscar Isaac. Oscar Isaac is a beautiful man. He's a beautiful man. And he looks fantastic in that film. If anything else, it is iconic truly because Oscar Isaac is in that film and he looks immaculate. He looks delicious, you know? So, yeah. The next one is Amy. Ugh. Okay, Amy is iconic truly because Amy Winehouse is iconic. And I love Amy Winehouse. And the documentary was very emotional. And it really revealed a lot of things that I did not know about her beforehand. Like, I don't know what else to say, you know? Amy is just it is just a fantastic documentary. And like I've like in understanding, not to be that guy, not to be that guy, but in understanding like and learning about film more, I think people really don't look at like documentaries as true films. I feel like a lot of times people get stuck on the content of the documentary, that they don't look at the actual structure of the film. Like they just don't, I don't think people see like the pedestrian viewer, as I like to call it. I don't think the pedestrian viewer sees documentaries and films and views them like and critiques them in the same way. Because I think again like you're more so invested in the content, like you're more so invested in the story that's being told, you know, like oh my gosh, like this murderer did this, like I'm, you know, like you're more invested in like that storyline. um and again like with when in telling somebody's life in a documentary, I feel like, I mean, I feel like it's important for all of them, but I guess especially in showcasing somebody's life, it's really important to really take account the way that you are telling the story and the lens in which you are telling the story, because there's a lot of bias that can go into storytelling where you are not being true to the humanity of that person, both good and bad, or if you like, or you can just tell that there is like an underlying agenda with it. And I feel like with Amy, it just does a great job of showcasing her like her life um underneath the surface of her success, underneath the surface of her career. Because I think a lot of people don't understand Amy Winehouse truly. They see her career and they know like she was troubled. Because, and okay, let me calm down. And you see it in the film is her music is so transparent. Like in listening to the lyrics of her songs, it's so heartbreaking because you really see and hear how her songs are like like fuck a window into her life. Like her songs are literally her opening the door and inviting people into her life, you know what I'm saying? Like it is that transparent, I feel like. And you really see in the film, you really see the parts that I think people especially at the time, did not realize. Because what you realize is that, what I realized is that in America, we caught on to her success so late in the game. We caught on to her success as she was really starting to spiral downward. Um, and so you don't realize, and I feel like because we caught her at such like we because we because we caught on to her so late and she was kind of already spiraling at that point. I feel like our views, like we were like, well, duh, she had issues. But I think like to a lot of people and to us, we just did not understand the extent of it. And I feel like the film did a really good job at showcasing that. Also, the ending is so fucking tragic. Every time I watch it, the ending has me in tears. Like the last 10-15 minutes where it talks about her death is so sad because it came out of absolutely nowhere. And then the last thing I'll say, because I'm taking forever on these lists, the last thing I'll say is Back to Black. Back to Black, the documentary edition, that is her song. That that is my favorite song rendition edition ever from her. If you have not heard it, you literally have to hear it. It is actually life changing. It is different. It is different. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna say. And then the last one, I'm gonna have to fly through the rest of these because the way that I'm talking about, I'm spending too much time. This is how I know, I'm a rambler. But anyways, the last one, Under the Skin. Under the Skin is truly iconic, mostly because I watched it in my race representation class. I learned a lot about critical race theory through it, but also I think it is a really great film. I think it is also very, it is cinematically amazing. All of the moments of the men in that pool, the whole moments of that house where she brings the men in, if you know, you know. Um, it is just fantastic. It is visually amazing. Amazing. Visually amazing. So yeah, that's really all I have to say. I'm gonna keep it pushing. I'm gonna keep it pushing. I'm gonna keep it pushing. So yeah. The next one, a good ride. It was a good ride. I enjoyed myself. Eighth grade. I thought it was fun. Thought it captured the awkwardness of being a tween absolutely perfectly. It was so cringy, but so cute. Um, One of the most uncomfortable viewing experiences to have, especially with an audience. Secondhand embarrassment is already embarrassing when you are alone, but secondhand embarrassment in a room full of people is next level. And yeah, it's just a fantastic film. It Comes at Night. I really liked It Comes at Night. I rated it 10 out of 10 when I watched it. I have no idea if it still holds up to the 10 out of 10. I think it is a masterful work in suspense building. I think it's something that should really be looked at a lot harder when it comes to suspense building because it works off of literally nothing but fear. Literally nothing but fear, and fear in an internal, from an internal standpoint, literally. The film thrives off of internalized fear, and I feel like that is something that you don't usually get from horror, suspense, thriller films. I feel like a lot of times there is a external that characters are dealing with that creates fear in them and in the viewer. But in this film, there's literally nothing. There's literally nothing to go off of besides maybe the sickness. But even then, you come to see in the film, is this sickness even real? So I feel like it is a masterful work in looking at how internalized fear can manifest on screen, and can create an entire film of suspense. Climax is really good. Climax is really good in the way, I just love how it spirals. And I also love how it is damn near one take film. You can kind of see, I think, in the moments where it relies on different avenues to whatever. That's not important. But I think it's a great work in choreography, and I also like that it's literally about dancers, especially in the whole, like, I don't want to say the whole long take because it's kind of all a long take, but the long take in the beginning where they are dancing. I just like, I like that relationship. I like the relationship and what that means. A film about dancing and choreography that relies very much on dancing and choreography, not in a literal sense, but in like a cinematic sense of like choreography between the actors and the camera and the director, and the fact that it is uh, a one a one shot or a long shot film, you know? And also, like, it's a really good suspenseful film. I would have liked a little bit more craziness and action, just a little bit more, but I think the craziness that ensues is already crazy enough. Actually, it's not crazy. Oh gosh. Actually, it's not crazy enough because I said I want more, but I think it is like crazy in its own way. Like, you're still watching it like, oh my gosh, you know? Um, The Farewell. The Farewell is a great film. I think the premise is immaculate. I think the premise of the film is absolutely amazing. And I think that's why it is such a great film. And it's just one of those films that is like, it's crazy. And it's crazy that that is kind of a real life thing. But yeah, The Farewell, really good. Last Black Man in San Francisco. Really love the film. It is also a very beautiful cinematic film. I like how it's kind of surreal in a sense. It kind of works on surrealistic aspects. And I think, what did I say? There's also, I saw parallels between Do the Right Thing and this film with, I call it the, what did I call them? The trouble raising, the troublemaking youth. That little group of people that are just like, they just are around the town, posted up in one place, just like causing trouble. Um, so that was just something that I saw that I related to, like, Do the Right Thing, um, which I think is just a fun tidbit to add. But I love The Last Black Man in San Francisco. The score is also very beautiful. What's another one? While We're Young. I really like While We're Young. I don't know why. I think like it was fun. It was a fun film that looked at the relationship between like Gen X and millennials, and just like it's just a fun film. Like, I just think it's just one of those fun, like, feel good films. Um that I be coming back to it every now and then. What's next? The Disaster Artist. The Disaster Artist is hilarious. I know the Francos, mostly James, is, I guess you could say, problematic, but I mean, I guess like he is problematic. Yes, like, you know, I know that subject, those people, mostly James Franco, is very sensitive and whatnot. Um, but I'm not gonna lie to you. Not gonna lie to you. It's a good film. It's a good film. Not gonna lie to you, it's a good film, my love. It's a good film, isn't it? So, yeah. And then the last two, mid 90s and Good Time. I love Good Time. Unpopular opinion. Well, actually, no. Um, Tangent, side note. Good Time and Hereditary. Okay, no. Good Time and Uncut Gems for me are the same. Like, I see the relationship and I see how I like each movie the same way that I like Hereditary and Midsummer. In the fact that the predecessor of the two I saw first, and so I like that one the most. And for me, the successor of those two um felt more like that film 2.0 than its own film that incorporated the same elements and style of the director, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? So, like, for me, like Hereditary and Good Time, I think they did a really good job of putting the directors in their own lane, giving them their own specific style. Like, you really attribute those films to their um authorship. Auteur? I think that's how you pronounce it. Authorship? Look at me. I'm trying to be pretentious, but I don't even know how to pronounce it. But yes, like, their style, their authorship. And I feel like the films after those, so like Midsummer and Uncut Gems, it's like so much of your style was already defined in those first two films. This doesn't feel necessarily new in any way, you know? Like Midsummer, what have you. A lot of the conventions, I'm like, I saw that in Hereditary. And I feel like you just did that because you did that in Hereditary. Like, you're trying to evoke the same emotions, but it doesn't come off as authentic as in Hereditary. Or like, oh, that convention, like that thing that you did, I feel like in Hereditary it really worked to add this, but this just kind of gets lost in the sauce in this film. And I feel the same way with like Uncut Gems. It's like at least with the Safdie brothers, it's like their main thing is they love to create, like they want to physically manifest anxiety within you. And it's like it really works in Good Time. And I mean it works in Uncut Gems, and a lot of people say like Uncut Gems is a form of like anxiety in a different way, and I don't discount that. But I think some of the conventions in Uncut Gems, it's like I saw this in Good Time, and like it really worked in Good Time, and I feel like you didn't have to do this here, or like you could have done something different here. Does that make sense? But yeah, I like Good Time a lot though. And as well as mid 90s, I like the look and feel of mid 90s. I've always been interested in like skateboard culture and just like skateboard films. Like those have always been pretty interesting to me. So I like that there's kind of like a film like that is also kind of in a dramatic sense, a dramatic film that looks at skateboard culture, because I feel like you get a lot of like, oh, kids on skateboard, no sense, blah blah. Or you also get like skateboard documentaries, or just like a skateboarding film, not even less documentary s like skateboarding films. But I don't know, like this is it's one of those things where like it merges two things that I don't think you see a lot of, or it it infuses something that I don't think people see a lot of. It infuses it with like a realism and humanity in a way that you really start to you understand like skateboarders and that whole demographic. A lot of people are like, why would you do that? Like, I don't understand the life of a skateboarder or people that are interested in it. And I think like you see just another story where there is a community, a bond, and you just see the lens of like skateboarding culture through a lens that we just usually don't see. So I thought mid 90s was a really good film. It's a good ride. It's always a good time. It is a good time, you know? So, moving on. We have It's Not Bad. Um, I have The Lighthouse. I enjoyed The Lighthouse. I thought it was a really good film. It's really fun. It's just, again, it's not a film that I come back to all the time. It was a film that I really liked the ride of watching it the first time, and I think that it was really interesting. I love the look and feel of it. The characters are very quirky. I think that the chemistry is there between the actors. I was gonna say their real names, but then I just forgot. Not Robert Pattinson. I forgot the other man's name. It's not coming to me. I'm gonna just let it be. But I think you can definitely see the chemistry between the two actors because the camaraderie plus the tension is really good. It's another one of those wacko, just silly, goofy films. But I think that it's still a good film, you know? Like I still think it's a good film. My whole like it's not bad. Again, it's not a film that I come back to all the time, or it's a film where it's like, yeah, like, you know, I thought it was pretty good. But like I don't have a huge emotional tie to these films, but I don't think any of these films are bad. I think these are all really good films anyways. So yeah, The Lighthouse. The second one is First Reformed. I thought it was pretty good. I think from what I remember, I watched it a while ago, but from what I remember, it was one of those films where you're like, it's a lot of like, okay, okay, and then it's like, oh my gosh, like, whoa, and then it's like, okay, okay, and then the ending, and then you're like, okay, what the fuck, you know? Um, so like I don't know, like it's one of those films I feel like you don't like, not everything processes when you see it on screen. It's a lot of getting information and then like waiting for that information to really click. And then it's like it kind of happens in the end where you're like, "Oh, oh shit. Okay. I understand. It's coming together." But then also like the very end of the film, it's like I no longer understand. I've lost it all. I no longer I no longer understand. I actually understand nothing, you know? And so but it's still a really good film. Like I still think it's a good film. I don't know what else to say. Like it's it's definitely one of those films that you have to sit and like contemplate for a little bit and then like go on YouTube and hope that somebody has a Easter egg explain video and then like maybe watch some like director interviews to really understand where he was coming from. Um but I think in and of itself it's still a good film. And it's really interesting because it also it adds like it's an existential film. And not that like I don't think we get a lot of existentialist films. Um but I do think we don't get a lot of existentialist films. And I know that like, you know, some films it's like not that existentialism can only be discussed so far, but it's like for the most part no one's created a new theory on existentialism, you know? So I understand that, but I also think that there's a lot, like I think existentialism, not to get into all this because, you know, this is my bread and butter, but with existentialism in general, especially with how it translates on film, I think a lot of people they like to go to like the nihilism part. Like it's really kind of like theistic God or nihilism. No God, no meaning, nothing. Like there's no reason for us to be here. Um, and I think with this film, it employs existentialism in an interesting way, especially because it has to do with like environmental anxiety, um, and like climate change. Like it also employs a very new age fear and embeds that in existentialism, if that makes sense. Like the idea where it's like are we really supposed to be here right now because the world's falling apart, you know? And it's like, you know, is doing all of this really worth it because like we're dying, the world's dying, like things are getting dreary. And I feel like I like that that film explores that and also takes it to, again, a level that I do not think we've seen it in the same way of like Ex Machina, where like it takes that environmental anxiety and pushes it literally to the edge, like literally to the edge and over. Um, so I think that that's interesting. And that would be interesting to not necessarily like the environmental part, but I don't know. Like I could watch a few films on existentialism. You know, like I could enjoy seeing a film or two on existentialism in the future. I don't know. So, but yeah. um, and the third one is Room. Not much to say about it. Very powerful film. I don't remember if I cried when I watched Room. I think I might have cried when I watched it. I don't know, but it's very moving. Um, and I enjoy how it looks at the after, like the PTSD of those moments. Because even in like documentaries, you hear about the crazy things that happened to them, but a lot of times it ends at like, and then they were found. In it on both spectrums, good and bad, you know. So I like how this one is a good story, and also it's like they were found, they were alive, they were fine. But this is the effects that it had on them, and also the fact that it focuses on a child, and learning about the outside world. That's interesting too. So yeah. And then the last one in this category is Zola. I really enjoyed Zola. I thought it was really fun. I have not fully like taken the time to think about Zola that much, just because I think again it's just a feel good film, but I don't really remember the original story, and I do want to read the original story to compare it to the film. Not necessarily to fact check it, because it tells you at the beginning of the story like this is not entirely based on the story, but it is very close to what happened and I believe it. I just like to know where it diverges. But the only thing that made Sola just like okay, I guess, is really the ending. I feel like the ending for me was just a bit fast. Like I just feel like it ended and I was like, "Oh, I feel like the ending kind of came out of nowhere." And it wasn't as climactic as I would have hoped it to be. Yes, it is like based off of a true story, so you have to stick to some realism. But I don't know, especially with how it plays with the realism and the reenactment. I think they could have pushed it a little further. I think they could have pushed it a little further, either in intensity or also in just where they left the story off at, or in the fact that it relies heavily on the premise that this is a told story, this is a shared story. I think I would have liked it to end in maybe some way where it ends in her, like, in the beginning it starts off where it's like, let me tell you about this bitch and how we fell off or whatever, and it's like to end in that same way. I feel like would have turned it into a nice complete circle, cinematically. um but I still think it was a really good film. I think it's beautiful. I forget exactly why they shot it in 16 millimeter, but I was really interested throughout the entire film as to why they shot it in 16 millimeter, because not that you can't do, like, I don't know, not that you can't shoot a film in 16 and it, look well. It's just like you can obviously tell that it is shot in a lower quality. Like you can tell that them shooting it in 16 and then like them shooting it in just a lower grade 16 millimeter was intentional, because you see it and it's not, it doesn't look low budget. Like it obviously looks like glamorized and hyperbolic, and like it gives it a certain flair to the film. But I don't know, I feel like a lot of times, like, even within shooting on film, people want that crispness. Obviously there is a grittiness. There is obviously a connotation to shooting on film, visually, but I feel like it's like even within that, people want the super good quality, 16, super 16, 35, and I feel like with this film, it kind of actively goes against that, where it's like, no, like we want something that is like, we want you to see a lot more of the grain. We want you to see a lot more haze and less, what is it called? Sharpness. Like the image is just overall fuzzy. And I think that it's really interesting that they decided to do that, and I would like to look more into why. I think I saw something, just a little blur, but I would like to read more into why, because I think that it was an interesting choice, um, visually. So yeah, those are mine for It's Not Bad, The Lighthouse, First Reform Room, and Zola. Moving on to eh, and I'm gonna run through these. Mostly again, like there was just something lacked for me personally. That's Midsummer, as I said, Uncut Gems, as I said, um, The Witch. I think again, I don't know, like I really enjoyed The Witch. I really enjoyed the aspect of like it sounds weird, but I really like the imagery of like the devil personified in an animal, or especially like the devil personified in a goat, or yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know where that comes from, but I enjoy that imagery, that connection. So like I thought that was interesting, but I think again, like in the end you're like, oh, it don't really got much to do with the goat, you know what I'm saying? Um So it's just The Lobster the same way. I think I said previously, but I didn't really, not that I didn't really care for The Lobster. It's just again, like I've come to realize Yorgos Lanthimos, like I think that he's a talented filmmaker. I think that his authorship is interesting in its own way. I think that he definitely has a particular style, yada yada yada. But I've just come to realize that like I'm just not the biggest fan of him in general. Like I'm not I don't yearn for his films in that way. Besides The Killing of a Sacred Deer. So yeah, The Lobster, it was just okay. Waves. Waves wasn't bad. I think there is a whole discussion to be had about white filmmakers, especially white male filmmakers, um, trying to tell black stories. I think a lot of people don't realize that just because I think a lot of people think that you can substitute a black character for a white character and just keep the ball rolling. You know? Like I think a lot of times it's like people don't realize that you can't keep you can't keep the script entirely the same and just put in a black character. Um I'm being completely honest. Some people might not like that stance. Some people might think like, "Oh no, like people are just people, blah blah blah." But I think blackness is too real. It is too real to be something that can just be substituted in, if that makes sense. Like it's like you can't I don't think you can write a white character and then put a black character in and keep everything the same. I think there has to be some different storytelling and way of going about it. And I think my problem with that film is that it it lacked that cultural awareness of the fact that you're telling a story about black people. Um And then I think it just, I don't know, like the shift, I didn't really need it. Like, I feel like those are two separate stories, but those are also two stories that you could tell at the same time without having to split it up. And I feel like them splitting it up, it just did not do it. Again, it just didn't do the family and blackness and general justice, um, in a general sense. And I don't think it did the two subjects that it focused most on, the kids. I don't think it did the kids justice in the film. But I'll say the brothers part was crazy. I'll say that. The brothers part of the film, that was crazy. Um, the Florida Project. I don't know why. I thought the Florida Project, like I was really invested in it until I watched it. And I think for me, what I did not really care for was the fact that the Florida Project it was less focused on a linear story, a linear timeline, storyline, plot line. um and was more focused on like capturing moments. And like I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just think I was there for a story, and I got a lot of moments. I got a lot of tidbits. um and in the end I was just like, eh. So there's not much to it. American Honey, yeah, again, not a bad film. I just was not reached emotionally from it. Um, that's all I have to say. And then lastly, finally, a scammer and a fraud. A scammer and a fraud. So, yeah, again, these are kind of the same in the category, where it's like some of these films I don't think are necessarily bad. I just think that for the most part, they just didn't do it for me. Native Son, I think again, Native Son was kind of like the Florida Project, where I hyped it up to be something else in my head, and then when I saw it, I'm like, this is just not as good as I thought it was gonna be. Um, I did not read Native Son. No, I didn't. I didn't read Native Son. I keep thinking Native Son is kind of related to Invisible Man. It's not. I did not read Native Son. Are they about the same? I'm not even gonna ask. Anyways, I did not read Native Son, so yeah, I didn't really have that to work off of either. I just didn't know the context of the film, or I didn't have much, you know. But yeah, I just watched it. I just wasn't a huge fan. I just wasn't a huge fan. So that High Life, the same. I really want to see, and I said this before. I stand by this statement. High Life made me want to see more. So a story about Andre 3000 and Robert Pattinson raising a little girl with Andre 3000 tending to a garden. Like that's the only story I need. I just want to see them raise a little girl together. Andre 3000 has a little garden. He be tending to it. He be harvesting, you know. Robert Pattinson's there. He got issues. He dealing with them. He didn't care of a child. Like that's the story that made me want to watch. Less so High Life. The Children's Act. I'm not gonna talk about that film. I only watched because I had a very embarrassing time in my life where I was somehow attracted to the guy in that film. It was off of the Bandersnatch fucking, what movie is that called? Black Mirror episode. So yeah, we're not gonna talk about that. But I watched that film, and it was okay. Anyways, Hot Summer Nights. That was a bit underwhelming. I forget exactly what my problem with it was. I think it was just a bit underwhelming. I think also it was trying to do like the crazy drugs, like like it is like just a bit too much. In a way where it was just like this just feels kind of corny, I guess. So, wasn't a huge fan. Spring Breakers. I haven't seen Spring Breakers in a while. I know, again, like I think it's Harmony Korine. So it's like if you like his stuff, you'll probably like that. You'll probably think it's a gem in and of itself. I know it had a lot of controversy, but from what I remember, eh, just not one of the films that I liked. Which he is also another controversial. Well, no, he is also another contentious um director for me. And like I loved Beach Bum. I loved Beach Bum. I thought that was such a hilarious film, like a crazy ride. I also do love Matthew McConaughey, so that might have played a big part in it. But also like I really like Beach Bum. Spring Breakers I did not really care for. Kids I only hated because like I hated how it ended, you know? And like not because like it was bad, like it's critically a bad film, but like no, like that shit was sad. I hated how it ended because it was sad. I don't like that film because it makes me sad. It makes me sad, you know? So it's like I'm not gonna say like it's a bad film. Like I think it's probably a really good film and it probably did a lot for the time, blah blah blah. But like I'm just like fuck kids. Fuck kids. Because like that shit is sad, you know? Like damn. So yeah, like Spring Breakers, you know? And the same with the Bling Ring. Like I haven't seen them in a long time, so I can't say much to them. I can't really form an actual opinion on them. I don't really remember much, but I just don't really care, to be honest. Um, the last one is False Positive. I actually watched that recently, and I have it in a scammer and a fraud because I truly do think I was scammed, and I truly do think it was fraud, low key. More so the fact that it was confusing as fuck, and the ending did not lend itself to creating like it was one of those things where it's like I feel like it did better by picking a side on who was crazy, who was delusional, who had lost their marbles, right? And then it's like, okay, if you're not, then I feel like you should have done a better job in also creating that ambiguity. Like I just don't think it did a really good job of picking a side of the three sides, you know? Like hers, his, ours. Hers, his, or like ambiguity. And I just don't think it did a good job of sticking to either one of those sides. And so in the end, you're just left with a general confusion, you know? You're just left being like, so like what happened? So like who? You know? Um but yeah, besides that, I just again, I watched it. It was okay. Those are all that I have after all of this. I spent so much time talking. After all of this, um, those are my list. If you agree with anything, let me know. If you disagree with anything, let me know. I will discuss all of them besides Moonlight. So, and then to try and end this off and keep this shit rolling as like just try to quickly end this off as soon as possible, because I know I've been talking for a while. The sick flick of the week. So, my sick flick of the week is just any A24 film. This is an episode dedicated to A24 through and through. So watch any of the films on this list. Watch any of the films. Watch your favorite A24 film. Watch your least favorite A24 film. Watch the A24 film you hate the most. I don't know. Watch any of them. Watch Moonlight. Watch 20th Century Women. Watch Under the Skin. Amy. Ex Machina. Uncut Gems. Zola. Watch Zola. Watch literally any A24 film. So that's my sick flick. It's just A24. And yeah, glad to have you back. Glad to be here. Oh, if you want to follow the podcast, like stay up to date, yada yada yada, get extra information. Um, on Instagram, it's at sickflick.pod. Follow the YouTube. Follow the YouTube. Follow the YouTube. um, Subscribe, like, comment, share, what have you. And I will see you in the next episode. Peace out, Girl Scout.